The heavy wooden doors of the courtroom swung open to reveal a space where the air was thick with the weight of expectation and the quiet hum of seeking justice. Behind the elevated bench sat a woman whose presence commanded immediate respect. Her nameplate read Judge Ebony K. Williams, a title that carried the authority of the law and the wisdom of experience. She often told those who entered her sanctuary that the only thing that mattered in this particular courtroom was how she perceived the truth. She was a woman shaped by the soul of North Carolina and the roots of Louisiana, tempered with the cool spirit of the West Coast and sharpened by a New York edge. She looked out at the gathered individuals, her gaze steady and searching, reminding everyone that equal justice was built upon the most important values of the country, which were freedom and integrity. These were the ideals she strove for every single day. She believed in being a voice for the voiceless and holding the scales of justice with a firm yet graceful hand. On this day, the first matter before the court involved two young women, Grace Lee and Farah Garcia. Grace Lee, the plaintiff, stood with a look of quiet longing and hurt, while Farah Garcia, the defendant, maintained a posture of guarded surprise. Miss Grace Lee was seeking $1,000 from her former girlfriend, claiming she had been blindsided when their relationship ended after she had already paid a significant holding fee for a new apartment they were supposed to share. The judge turned her attention to Miss Lee and asked her to explain why they were in court. Miss Lee spoke with a voice that trembled slightly from the memory of a love she thought was permanent. She explained that she was suing for $1,000 because she felt lied to. She believed they were moving in together, but instead, the relationship ended and she was left to deal with the financial consequences alone. The $1,000 represented half of a $2,000 deposit. When the lease did not move forward, the landlord only returned $1,000, leaving Miss Lee with a loss of the other $1,000. They had been together for almost 2 years, a span of time that usually signifies a deep commitment. However, when the judge questioned Miss Garcia, a different story began to emerge. Miss Garcia explained that while they had discussed the idea of living together one day, she had never actually agreed to a specific apartment or a specific timeline. She had gone away to San Diego for 1 week to visit her family, and while she was gone, Miss Lee had toured an apartment and paid the holding fee without her knowledge or consent. Miss Lee argued that they had been talking about this for 6 months. They had gone shopping together for household items and shared dreams of a life together. The judge looked through the evidence provided, which included text messages. In one exchange from September, Miss Garcia had pointed out a rug she liked, and Miss Lee had responded that they would have the cutest place. Miss Garcia had replied that she could not wait. In another message, Miss Garcia mentioned that things would be easier if all their belongings were in one place. As the judge listened, she realized that this was a case of misaligned expectations. Miss Garcia admitted that she had reconnected with an old friend, a gentleman, while she was home in San Diego. Although she insisted that nothing physical had happened and she had not cheated, the encounter made her realize that she was no longer fully invested in her relationship with Miss Lee. She chose to end the relationship because she did not want to mislead herself or Miss Lee any longer. Judge Williams looked at Miss Lee with deep empathy. She understood the pain of a heart that had moved faster than the reality of the situation. She noted that while the text messages showed a shared fantasy of a future, they did not constitute a legal agreement to a specific financial obligation. Miss Lee had made the decision to pay the $2,000 unilaterally, hoping to surprise her partner. The judge explained that while the heart sees possibilities, the law requires consent and mutual agreement for financial responsibility. The ruling was difficult but clear. The judge dismissed the case, explaining to Miss Lee that the $1,000 was the cost of a lesson learned. She encouraged Miss Lee to understand that although it hurt, she would never find her true happily ever after until she was willing to move past this pain. The two women left the courtroom, one carrying the weight of a lost dream and the other carrying the weight of a difficult truth. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted as the next case was called. This matter involved Maxwell Connors and his uncle, Perry Caldwell. The dispute was over theater tickets valued at $450. Maxwell, A young man with a passion for the arts claimed that his late aunt, who had been the wife of Mr. Caldwell, had gifted him these tickets before she passed away. However, after her passing, his uncle had sold the tickets instead of giving them to him. Maxwell spoke with great affection about his aunt. She had been the person who introduced him to the theater, taking him to performances since he was a child and inspiring his own pursuit of acting. His relationship with his uncle, however, was strained. They had never seen eye to eye, and Maxwell felt that his uncle had never supported his dreams. The aunt had passed away in October of the previous year. Before her passing, she had sent Maxwell a screenshot of tickets to a show in Chicago that he had wanted to see for a very long time. She told him it was a gift for him. However, when Maxwell approached his uncle about the tickets, Mr. Caldwell informed him that he had already sold them. Mr. Caldwell stood before the judge and explained that he had sold the tickets because of financial problems. He argued that the tickets were never physically given to Maxwell and that since his wife was no longer there, he felt he had the right to sell them to recoup costs. He even mentioned that his wife had purchased the tickets using his credit card. Judge Williams looked at the text messages Maxwell provided. The messages clearly showed the aunt's intention. She had told Maxwell that she had secured the tickets for them to see the show in December. The judge asked Mr. Caldwell a very direct question. She asked if he would have allowed his nephew to use the ticket if money were no object and there was no financial hardship. Mr. Caldwell answered with a blunt and honest no. The judge was visibly displeased with this answer. She told Mr. Caldwell that his disposition and his intentions were not in the spirit of doing the right thing. She emphasized that words and intentions matter, especially when they represent the final wishes of a loved one. The aunt had clearly intended for one of those tickets to be a gift for Maxwell. The fact that the uncle chose to ignore his late wife's kindness toward her nephew simply because he did not like the young man was, in the eyes of the court, a failure of integrity. Judge Williams ruled in favor of Maxwell Connors for the full amount of $450. She told Mr. Caldwell that while he might have felt the tickets were his property, the evidence of his wife's gift was undeniable. Maxwell thanked the court, feeling a sense of peace that his aunt's memory and her support for his dreams had been honored. As the session came to an end, the courtroom stood as a testament to the complexities of human relationships. Whether it was the end of a romance or a dispute within a family, the lessons remained the same. Justice was not just about money or contracts, it was about integrity, the weight of our words, and the courage to treat one another with grace even in the midst of conflict. Judge Ebony K. Williams gathered her robes and departed, leaving behind a room where the truth had been spoken and the balance of fairness had been restored for another day.